Morning, everyone. My name is Vivian. And before I introduce the topic, I'm just gonna pass off to Zach to start off introducing the panelists, and then we'll go over to our virtual panelists.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Zach Sanderson. My title in this Startup Week Boston actually says Startupper, but I've worked in a startup that has grown quite a bit, JustWorks, actually, for the last 6 years. And we were really, really excited to have an opportunity to go ahead and sponsor this event. And yeah, happy to speak more on benefits and perks today.
All right.
It is hard to not look at the screen when you're sitting here.
So we're gonna over to Joe.
All right. So my name is Joseph Aleem. I'm the VP of Product and Operations at Compt. Compt essentially is a perk stipend platform where we help companies manage inclusive and personalized stipends. So think about, instead of offering a single gym membership, you can offer $50 a month to your employees towards health and wellness. And health and wellness might mean getting a massage, buying running shoes, a meditation app, and a variety of different things. So basically allowing you to expand your benefits offerings. At Compt, I oversee product, customer success, and a little bit of operations. And before Compt, I actually started a talent acquisition company in the DEI space called ScholarJet. So I've been working with people ops and talent acquisition for a while.
I can go next. Can they hear us?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. I am Shim Marquette. I am on day 4 of being the Chief People Officer at Second Nature, which is a software company for real estate management firms. Previously spent 9 years as the head of people at EverQuote, which is a Boston-based insurance marketplace.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassandra Rose. Want to just give a shout out to Jameet for congratulations on day 4 and already speaking quickly for giving your time. I am the head of people at Fringe. We are a lifestyle benefits platform where we allow employers to be able to really incentivize employees through their benefits programs for things that are relevant to them today. I have nearly 2 decades of HR experience, and I really am a huge advocate around the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion and benefits, because as we think about well-being, whether it's health, physical, mental, or financial, a lot of us procure those resources from our employers. So it's important that they're as inclusive as possible. And I know that this discussion today will help you think that way as well.
All right. Thank you. So today's panel is going to be talking about benefits and perks. Oh my, scaling happy hours to health insurance packages as you grow. So the reason for this topic is really because, as we know, perks are a huge part of why people choose to work at organizations, and we're talking about how those change as companies grow, because the goal of every startup is to grow beyond where they currently are. And so to kick us off with the panel, I'm going to start with a question, and really any one of you can choose to answer this question. But benefit offerings change over time for a variety of reasons, either cost, company size, vendor compatibility, etc. How can startups effectively manage change so that employees do not feel like they're at a loss when these changes inevitably happen?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that on. I've had the good fortune to work at companies within the Fortune 100, have over 100,000 employees in the US or globally, and have really deep pockets. So from year to year, you can expect a pretty robust and stable offering of benefits. Once you step into the startup world, we really have to respond not just to the market, but also how our funding is looking, what our profitability looks like. So what I like to suggest to people is just to make sure that you're sharing your secrets with your employees. And what I mean by that is your strategy. I know that there's no way to have a, a compass and be able to know for the next 3 years, this is how we're going to be trending, but share with them the challenges that you're facing as well. We all know that healthcare is a landscape that's forever changing from the government level down. We know that we're investing in you. So optimize what the investment is. Let people know how much you're investing, whether it's financially, and how you're shaping that as part of your budget, but also let them know next year we may not be able to offer benefits that may be completely premium free, or we may not be able to always have, an office in every location that we open up services. But if you're letting them know that and seeding the change management conversation, people don't feel surprised when you do have to make a change, and it feels more like a partnership.
Thank you, Cassandra. Shim, if you can shed some more light, I know that you've had the experience of having to go from covering 100% of benefits in that. So if you can share more light and just buttress what Cassandra just said.
Sure. Yeah. Was really fortunate to go through the hypergrowth experience at EverQuote of going from 40 employees to just over 700. But as part of that, providing 100% premium coverage for employees and their families no longer became financially possible. The expense was just too great. I think to echo what Cassandra said, being able to explain the market dynamics, being able to explain the costs, being able to explain kind of really looking at our balance sheet, how it affected our bottom line, how it affected our P&Ls. We were able to, I don't want to say create buy-in, right? Like these are not easily well-received conversations, but at least you're able to justify it, right? And kind of understand what the thought process was, and really being as transparent as possible with employees, helping them understand, here is the cost, here is the impact on our revenue, here is the impact to our ability to grow and scale. I think helped our employees understand. The other thing that I would say is being really transparent. I mean, Cassandra touched on this as well. As soon as you were beginning to think about these things, as soon as you were beginning to move into action, letting employees know, right? This isn't the type of change you want to roll out in open enrollment, with 2 weeks and then, hey, benefits are going to go live 3 weeks later. You want to sort of start to plant the seeds early on, and really kind of create a very strong comms plan with opportunities for question and answers. I don't think we aced it at EverQuote. This is hindsight speaking, right? These are really challenging conversations. But I think that while it's scary to introduce some of these changes, really it's the right thing to do by our employees, and that's really the goal.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd love to speak on that as well, because one of the key concepts everyone's mentioning is simple and direct communication. Really, like at this level, as a startup, one of the coolest things in my experience as well. JustWorks had gone from, when I joined, 90 people to over 1,000 by this point. And as a background, we do offer benefits, payroll, tax compliance, those types of services. Realized I didn't mention that earlier. But being a part of that and having that direct communication is something that's really important, because there is an expectation oftentimes, for the most part, to see maybe a 7 to 10% increase in at least like the health insurance side of the spend that you're going to put in each year. And if it's 7%, depending on how your setup is with your team, like if you're covering 100% and you need to change that, the bottom line is something that if you're willing to share it, people oftentimes view it a bit more empathetically. And building out those benefit strategies too. It doesn't mean that you need to stay with the same plan. Open enrollment comes up strategically, as mentioned prior, like doing something prior to open enrollment and saying, okay, maybe we can offer a different set of benefits. Maybe we can offer different plans that are less expensive, but offer a different variety of, I guess you would, benefits, literally. Like the makeup of the plan could be different. And those are all things like to think about, because oftentimes with a smaller team, pulling talent, like senior talent, especially out of a maybe more established company, can be a little difficult. So there's nothing better than really having, like a robust benefits package that people can look at up front and say, hey, like, cool, I can cover my family. And then also maybe on the other end, like, awesome, maybe some entry level people fresh out of, Harvard. They're probably not going to have the same needs as those C-level execs that you're pulling. And ultimately it's like that communication and like that thought process and really just paying it close attention. I think that's really important.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll just chime in real quick to say I definitely agree with what's been said, and definitely want to emphasize like letting employees feel heard whenever these types of decisions are being made. Ultimately, even if employees are expressing kind of their preferences, their opinions, their thoughts around these different changes, and you might not wind up going with what they actually wanted in the first place, but just the kind of act of talking to your employees, communicating with them, and asking for their opinion and their thoughts to see if maybe you can accommodate, what they're feeling and thinking, I think is super important. And then for I've worked with a lot of companies about like their different benefits packages and their offerings. And sometimes there are budget cuts, sometimes there are decreases. And, oftentimes it's definitely worthwhile to see if you can figure out any creative ways to maintain a certain level of offerings with the reduced budget. So it's not like, let's completely axe this benefit, or let's see if we can kind of repurpose some of these funds to be kind of more of a multi-use, rather than, these funds were originally just for L&D. And now we're not going to have an L&D stipend anymore. But instead, hey, actually, maybe this month or this year, you can have $500 for either, student loan repayments or L&D or health and wellness, and kind of just giving employees the option there.
Thank you, Joe. Zach, you raised a really good point about the difference in employee population and benefit packages. Keeping in mind employee population, how do you ensure that your employees have a diverse benefit offering, and how does equity and inclusion come into play when you're thinking about that?
That is a good question. I think from an equity standpoint, like I had mentioned previously, the dynamic between employees from a maybe age and location perspective are it's something to pay attention to when selecting things, especially like health insurance. It's something to really pay attention to, because there's nothing worse than finding a really good like Tufts plan in Boston, and you hire somebody in California and they're like, but I want Kaiser. Like, Kaiser's the good thing out there, So in those situations, it can be a little like, like what did I do? I picked a local plan, but we're hiring across the country. So just in terms of setting the stage, I think that situation is something to definitely take in mind, or to put in mind. And then additionally, demographics of people. So age, especially like mentioned earlier, if you have a 26, 27-year-old person that just came off their parents' health insurance, it's probably not very top of mind. It's probably like, I'm invincible. I can do whatever I want. I'm never going to have an issue. I'm never going to the doctor. Don't care. And it's not like that for everybody. So I especially communication on this front, bring them into these decisions a little bit, like survey people. A nice little survey monkey is super easy to just get a gauge of, hey, what do you care about? Do you care about this? And then taking those opinions and like preferences into consideration when selecting things is actually a really good way of ensuring that you're not making a decision behind closed doors, when some people might have very specific issues that they do need taken care of. Chronic or otherwise, right? So I would definitely start with just clear, direct communication. Ask people what they want, what they need, and then think about maybe like a bronze, silver, gold type of package. Maybe a plan that's not so rich but super cheap, something right in the middle, and then like a very nice Cadillac plan, $0 deductible. Everything's paid for like the C-level executives that you need to attract. I think that's oftentimes a very rich benefit strategy. And then think about like national plans. Where are you hiring? try to get something that's national, that's everywhere, and not just like localized, because then you can start really piling up the paperwork when it comes to, maybe there's someone good in Tulsa that you need to hire. Maybe there's someone good in California you need to hire. Boston, of course. The administrative work behind that alone, that could take, I mean, that'd become a full-time job, right? So all that to say, and all that to get back to the original question, is like very clear communication and understanding that a national benefit strategy could be something that's really, really effective to make sure that there's an equitable and like reasonable benefit offering, at least on the health insurance side of things. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think it did, Zach. Well, what I want to share is 2 words: access and literacy. And we have to understand the difference between these two. I think Zach did a good job of understanding access. Even though you may be at 10, 20, or even 100 employees today, if your strategy is to grow, which is why we're all here, you have to really think about the next step. So staying locked in step with the business plan, and if you're planning to go nationally or globally, to think how that will affect the benefits that you're offering today. What I like to tell even the founders that I'm working with now are, if we had 1,000 employees, if we had 10,000 employees, would we be making this decision right now? And really reverse engineer how we're coming about our strategy. So when I talk about access, just think through those different lenses. Are there people that you want to be able to attract to your organization that you may not currently have now? People who identify as LGBTQIA, women in the workforce. What are the things that are needed within your benefits programs to support those communities coming into your workplace? If you can't afford it right away, guess what? That's fine. I'm a big believer that time was created so that everything doesn't happen at once. That's how you create a roadmap. Once we hit 100 employees, once you hit 500 employees, these things become cheaper because now you have that scale to be able to do that. So when someone's asking the question, like Zach may say, you may want to recruit someone C-suite and they may be talking about fertility benefits. You can say, we don't currently have this robust program right now, but through medical insurance, you can do X, Y, Z. And within the next 2 to 3 years, as we grow, that is on our plan to be able to introduce. That's a very different conversation than saying, I just don't have it. And then the second part around literacy is, there's a lot of people who don't understand benefits. I will raise my hand as one of the first people who did that. When my boss, who saw my potential, was like, hey, you should do benefits. I was like, I'm not even sure I understand healthcare, let alone enough to be able to explain it to 1,000 people. It's a very dense system. If you ever feel like you can't sleep, just pull out like a benefits guide and just start reading through that puppy, right? Like, we've all been there. So what I like to tell people is, make it interesting, make it dynamic. Are there people in your organization that are struggling with student loans? Typically someone's under 40, they're struggling with it. Or if they have kids who are heading to college, they're thinking about it. How can you make sure you're putting in programmings and curating things to say, hey, we can help you with this, and this is how? Connect the lifestyle to the benefit versus just giving people a lottery of things that they just have to like configure on their own. Know that for some people, this is their first time in tech. This is their first time in startup. They don't even know what questions to ask. And so we actually have JustWorks as our PEO. I'm the one going through those benefits guides and saying, hey, how many visits do you get for dental hygiene? Like, seriously, these are the types of questions I'm asking, because I want to be able to proactively share that with my employees, because they won't know to ask me that. But when I'm sharing that information with them, they can be like, you know what, Susie needs braces. I need to choose the plan with braces and not feel like we gotcha. So make sure that you're thinking through access, and that's correlated to your business plan. And then literacy. What can I learn and share with my employees so they feel like they're getting a really good benefit?
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that, I think I would encourage anybody, especially anybody here who's maybe starting to enter this world of benefits. Maybe you're not the HR person or you've got a small organization. Really lean on your PEO, lean on your benefits broker. I wish I had done more of that early on. For those of us who are coming into these roles of, heads of people or running benefits, but maybe don't have deep expertise, right? You will learn that over time. But there are some really valuable programs, HSAs, FSAs, 401ks, right? don't try to become the expert at once. Lean on these built-in resources that you have through your POs, through your benefits brokers. Have them teach you, have them teach your employees. These are essentially what we're paying them for, right? This is a great resource. So many employees, literally CEOs, don't understand the value of putting money into like a dependent care FSA. And it is huge. I mean, the tax savings are enormous. I could speak for hours about it if you have dependents or children who are, in maybe daycare, go to summer camps. So hugely valuable. And then also being really thoughtful about, in a world in which, I mean, there are some great programs like Fringe, like Comp, where you can kind of offer budgets and then employees can select. For those of us who are having to make decisions, really trying to align those decisions strategically to your DEI priorities, right? So at EverQuote, we just began to roll out a fertility benefit. A lot of that was really geared towards trying to bring in and retain more women in senior leadership. And that was a big thing we heard from our Women's Forum ERG, right? That was something that the female leaders in our organization had been asking for quite some time. And, we started small, right? You don't have to start with, a 20K fertility benefit. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And I think there will be a lot of excitement when EverQuote does roll it out in open enrollment in the next couple of weeks.
I think just one kind of different angle that I'd add is that, employees, might have one preference one day, but then employees also go through lots of changes in different life stages as well. That 27-year-old who's freshly coming out of, their parents' health insurance, anything like that, a couple years later might be thinking about having a family, having kids, or, God forbid, some life event happens, they're in a different situation. So it's definitely just a moving target all the time. And I think some employers make the mistake of kind of saying, I'm going to classify this type of employee in this group, and this benefit is for these types of employees, and not kind of understand that employees are all kind of shifting around and life happens. So I think, in kind of our offering, and I'm sure Fringe as well, it's giving employees that power of choice. We're trying to offer, a family stipend. Family to one employee might be fertility benefits, might be childcare, might be daycare. But family to another employee might be, buying a gift for your mom or going to visit your family on a surprise, visit or something like that. And just kind of maintaining as much flexibility as you can so that employees can feel like they have that option. I like to say, you just treat them as adults, don't try to prescribe different benefits on what you think they need, but ask them and let them kind of choose for themselves.
Thank you. And I really like what Cassandra said about connecting the lifestyle to the choice. Since a lot of us have either moved to like a fully remote or a hybrid work structure, how has that changed the types of benefit offerings that we are providing to employees? And does that even factor in?
I can actually jump in here first. One quick thing that we noticed is throughout the pandemic, companies were coming to us designing their different programs, and there's just a huge uptick in employees asking for cell phone, internet reimbursements, and remote work office equipment, anything to support that working from home. There's actually so much gray area and confusion around whether it's mandatory for certain employers in certain states to offer, internet or cell phone reimbursements. But generally, that was a huge kind of uptick in what we saw in our offerings. And then more recently, just as people are transitioning back, there's this uptick in commuter benefits again, and kind of co-working stipends and things like that. So all these things kind of aren't surprising, but they definitely go hand in hand with, the initiatives that employers are making right now.
Yeah, and I would share that I've even seen articles around making sure you're not being discriminatory towards remote or hybrid employees. It's very easy to be out of sight, out of mind. And I know a lot of organizations, Fringe included, we're a remote first organization. So when we're thinking of something as simple as, hey, we want to have snacks at our clubhouse, the one location, that physical location we do have, we're like, well, then we should offer snacks to people who work for us. How can we ship it to them? Can we partner with a vendor? Is it me literally just pulling chips into a FedEx and sending it out, right? So just trying to balance those things. So I think when you're thinking about benefits and perks, of course, we know what the table stakes are, and we've addressed that. You want to make sure that any program that is going to physically, mentally, or financially benefit somebody, benefits anyone who works at your organization. But when you start to think about customization or those single point solutions, whether it be fertility or pet insurance, how are you communicating those benefits? How are you making sure that people are aware of them? And like everyone has said, those lifestyle benefits. Someone who may be 26 is not thinking about buying a house necessarily, but 2-3 years from now, how can they access that information that you have a home purchasing program and not have to be in office and pass by a flyer or talk to someone to do that? So one of the things that I've done in my past is we will actually run different reports. So we would run reports on everyone turning 26 in 2023 and have a special reboarding session just for them, because they may not even realize that, you know, that parental benefit of not having to pay premiums, that's gone away. Happy birthday. So we make sure to, you know, tell them all the information as though they're new hires. When we're thinking about parents, a lot of times we're just hoping that the parents raise their hands. I'm like, hey, let's just have a program around what it means to be a parent at French. Here are some benefits, here are some programs, because the person who's thinking about it may not feel comfortable talking to their manager. But again, if you're being proactive, and I'm talking about once a year, I know you already have a lot going on. So I don't want you to like hear all of our advice and be like, I have a lot of homework to do today. If you can do these programs once a year, record them, have them available on demand to your population, and allow employees to self-service them, this is a great way to, again, show your employees that you're adults. We trust you. We are packaging things in the best way that we know how. We're asking for your information to help us make it better for you. And this is how we can showcase that.
I love the term reboarding. It's awesome. I hope you don't mind me stealing that.
Go ahead. I'm pretty sure I took it from somebody else. So.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, and also like remote work, it's changed the landscape of how people work forever. Like that's undeniable, I think, by this point. So I think that counts for mental health. And if we're talking about benefits, like making sure people are feeling comfortable, because there is the potential for isolation depending on the type of people that you're hiring and the people, the kind of work they do. You know, maybe they do spend 4 or 5 days without interacting with another human being, but like to think about like other types of benefits, talk space, like potentially like if your insurance plan doesn't necessarily cover like a therapist, then maybe some kind of like health stipend, mental health stipend. I think those are all really good things to think about. Just considering like obviously the benefits are important from a health insurance perspective, but like keeping people happy and like in the right state of mind is super, I think, more important now probably than it ever has been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've done a lot of we did get Headspace during the pandemic, and our employees have really enjoyed that. I also think that being able to speak more openly, more candidly, more transparently about mental health. We actually did our benefits team did a presentation on how to find a therapist using kind of the patient finder and the My Doctor, you know, through our healthcare, through Blue Cross Blue Shield. A lot of employees, I think, are anxious, you know, to talk about those things. I mean, a lot of us forget about being an employee. A lot of people are anxious to talk about that, right? So being able to speak openly about it, you know, sharing some of our own personal experiences, and then also really encouraging our employees to seek out help, and letting them know, hey, you have this amount of covered visits, you have this benefit. Often EAPs include a certain number of free benefits. Your EAP provider may also be able to help in finding a therapist. But you know, these are like, it's like kind of table stakes, but also like so important that we speak openly and candidly about it, because we know that a lot of our employees were struggling, and you know, we in HR, we as employers, we as managers, like we are not therapists. Like that's like not, we, you know, it's not the best use of our skill set. And also like we want our employees to get professional help when they need it. Like we all sometimes need it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Mental health is definitely very important. Like, I'm glad that you touched on that Zach and Jim, and just the importance of making sure that we are making sure that our people are okay. This past year, there's been a lot of changes legislature-wise in regards to women's health. And so I would like for each of you to talk about how to offer or start a conversation as far as abortion is concerned in or out of state, the transport for that, the coverage for that. Is that something that you're thinking about or have started a conversation around?
Yeah, I can start on this conversation. So I think every HR person is literally exhausted at this point because it didn't start this year. I think it's been every year, but the pandemic, we have gone from like workers' comp, leave of absence, figure out a pandemic plan, and now how do we support employees in their right to choose? And this topic, though we want to take it out of the politics because it's a healthcare decision, it's hard not to identify the fact that there are people in the organization who may be happy with that decision and who may think that the employer is making a decision that is very political by continuing to offer these benefits. So I do want to honor that those conversations are probably taking place in your organizations. And if they're not, they're happening behind closed doors and in small groups. So I think it's very important to first just try to figure out the best forum to be able to alleviate people's concerns that all of a sudden you're taking a political standpoint because you are offering healthcare. Right. And just make sure people understand that healthcare is something that we want to provide, and this is a component of it. So that's one thing I just want to address to begin with. Secondly, there are a number of ways that you can provide this service. And what I would say is always check with legal, because something that you're able to roll out, again, if you're a national organization, you have remote first, you may actually be not in compliance with certain laws where your employee may be based. So when you come up with this policy, check if you have a PEO like JustWorks, check with them if that's something that you can actually provide. But then again, check with legal and say, hey, we have employees in these 14 states. Do you see any red flags? Because what I don't want to do is offer a benefit to an employee that then they legally have to challenge later on down the line. And if they do, how can we support that to better understand your risk? One of the ways that I share with people is usually a easier lift is your health savings account, your HSA, those enrolled in your high deductible health plans, if that's what you're offering. They can use those funds to be able to seek out abortion services. So just like Shim said, you don't have to necessarily find the most robust way of offering everything, but you can start to find those little lift things that already exist in the plans that you offer and make sure that everyone is aware of those things. So that's where I would start. And then if you want to lean further in and be able to reimburse, make sure you're getting a program that's compliant and that you're communicating it in a way that the same way you would communicate dental or vision benefits, that doesn't feel very charged. If that's the stance that you want to go with, because again, there are employees on both sides of the issue. And what we want to do as HR, as startup leaders, is to make sure that we're providing the best healthcare that we can for our employees.
Yeah, I feel fortunate that while some of these changes came out, I was at EverQuote. We are a larger scale organization, so we are self-insured, which meant that we were able to integrate these changes directly into our plan. That's something that most startups are not going to be able to do. But I would, again, encourage you to speak with your PEOs, speak with your benefits brokers, and see what optionalities you have to select insurance programs that might meet your needs. You know, at EverQuote, we have two large offices in Texas. We have one large office in Indiana. We have a large remote workforce, you know, kind of through middle America. We are not a primarily Boston-based company anymore. So being really, really thoughtful about those as you scale. And then again, I do believe that in the next couple of years, we'll probably see some new, like, I actually think this is a great startup idea, being able to kind of like facilitate this and maintaining HIPAA and confidentiality and allowing employers to put in money that then a startup could then. So for any of the entrepreneurs out there, create that and then come sell it to me. But maybe Cassandra also already knows or Joe knows of services that exist this. I don't know if either of your platforms do this.
I'll just kind of comment that like kind of our stance was pretty clear, and we wanted to support kind of medical care related to this. And there's definitely risk involved. And I think the first and foremost thing that we wanted to do was inform anyone who was interested in still offering to these this benefit to their employees that there is inherent risk depending on where your employees are located. Either the employer or the employee could get in trouble for kind of doing these various things. But what we kind of share is like a spectrum of what you can do. On the more conservative side, supporting the travel, the childcare costs associated with someone getting an abortion procedure, anything like that. On the kind of less conservative side, the potentially more risky side that could have potential negative benefits depending where the employee is located, you can straight up say, I'm going to give you a stipend just for abortion procedures and things like that. I think so. What we do in Compt, we help employers offer different stipends for different purposes. And one conservative approach that we've kind of suggested is that, and many of our customers who will not be identified have done this, is they've created kind of an X amount a year stipend that says this is for out-of-state care. When you upload, your receipt to get reimbursed for this, to submit a claim basically against this balance, don't upload any medical information, don't upload any details of this. We don't want to know. And it's a little bit of the honor system there. Whether this is scalable to a multi-thousand, employee company, leveraging the honor system for that is kind of a question for each employer to answer individually. But we've seen that for a lot of smaller companies, especially startups, saying, hey, like here's X amount a year, cover travel, cover childcare, cover the procedure itself. Like this is what we're offering to you. We want to support you, and just kind of leave it at that. That's been a pretty good kind of conservative blanket approach to at least get something in front of your employees.
Yeah, and from the JustWorks perspective, as a team that supplies a lot of these benefits, like please lean on us for any additional information that you might need. I think what's been said here is like a really good way of going about making sure that you're doing like things the right way, leaning on your legal team, leaning on your PEO, leaning on your benefit advisors. Because this is obviously a very important and serious topic. And I think that between that and like, I would just say ensuring that people understand the communication, as again mentioned, to make sure that like maybe there are people on two sides of this. I think it's a very mature way of approaching it, and to say that, and to ensure that from a benefits perspective, you're properly reimbursing anyone that does need care in this way. And our company would agree with me is absolutely the right thing to do. And like our blog, like, I mean, those are the kind of things that we would release in terms of like statements to say like, this is where we stand on the issue. Immediately, our leadership team started looking into what can we do to help this situation? How can we like put ourselves and our clients essentially in the most advantageous position? And that is not the easiest conversation to have with companies that are way larger than a lot of us. The good news is like things have obviously panned out, as hearing about on the panel, and we've been able to go the right direction when it comes to these decisions. But yeah, I'm happy that we were able to supply some help there. I wasn't sure who had said that up on the screen, but yeah.
Thank you. And as we think about perks, sometimes we look at the total package as a whole in terms of monetary value, but when do you decide to give a pay increase versus additional perks? And how do you communicate the value of the perks that you are offering to someone who is perhaps expected more pay, but instead getting more perks?
I want to take this question because this is my jam right here.
Okay.
So if anyone's not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do, feel free. And what I like to tell people is 32. I always want you to think about that number in your head when you're looking at new jobs, when you're hiring people, because 32% of your total compensation is embedded in your benefits. And I used to joke all the time with my employees that when you like say, I'm not going to the doctor, I haven't been to the dentist since high school, I go into that corner over there and just like cry, because I'm paying millions of dollars for you to have access that you're not taking advantage of. And, you know, that $1 million baby, that preemie baby would have come to term had you gone to the doctor often enough. You wouldn't have to have a root canal if you just went to your preventative cleanings. That's what I'm trying to figure out, how many you get per year, so I can encourage you to do that. So what I tell people is, before you ask me for a salary increase, and I've actually said this to my company, I want to first know, are you taking advantage of your benefits? Are you contributing to your 401k? Are you showing up to the doctor? Because if you're not, what you're telling me is, hey, can I take a 32% pay cut? I don't need all this money. I don't need all these resources. That's what you're doing. And if I gave it to you in cash and you had to go acquire all these things, you set up your own IRA, you had to go into the public exchange, you would not be able to afford the quality that we're providing you. And I think a great way to be able to visualize this for people is to be able to give them a total reward statement. That's not always easy or simple, but when people are realizing just how much the company is investing in them, they'd be shocked at that salary increase is already there. And if you go to the competitor next door and are paying double, not having the same level of benefits, you're actually giving yourself a pay cut. So when I think about benefits, I actually think about it as a third of the equation of how I attract talent and retain talent. And again, the only way they'll understand that is for me to re-engage them as often as possible into how they can optimize it for themselves, for their families, and honestly, to leave a legacy.
I agree with everything you said, Cassandra. I think though I would, and you can kind of call me out on this. I'm probably less
Okay.
of the benefits pros than some of you, but I think that my approach is first, like, make sure that you are paying market rate for your employees, right? Same thing with benefits. Make sure you're at market. But I think early on at EverQuote, we actually fell into the trap a little bit of, we had really, really great benefits, right? 100% employee coverage for pretty much everything, really, really strong benefits. And as a result, our salaries kind of lagged.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, those 100% employee benefits are no longer scalable. Your salary is kind of below market. And when you try and do the flip, everyone's a little bit upside down. So you really have to compensate on salary. The first thing I would say is, make sure you have a mechanism for make sure you are paying market rate for your employees. And, you know, market rate at every company looks different, right? It doesn't have to be 90th percentile. It can be 50th, just whatever you're aligned on. And then again, understand what the market expectation is for benefits in the space you want to play in and align on that, right? And then slowly over time, you can kind of begin to say, okay, where am I lagging behind? Where am I lagging ahead? Where do I want to invest my money, right? But I do think that you're making a great point, which is making sure, do employees, what you're essentially saying, right? You said it before, I wrote it down, access and literacy. I love it, which is like, do our employees understand what the benefit of the benefits we're providing is? And if not, like, we have some work to do as HR professionals.
Definitely agree with Shim and Cassandra on those points. I think communicating, being transparent about, like, this is what your benefits are worth, whether it's like an estimate, like even including things like, this is what your PTO is potentially worth, this is what your premiums are worth, this is what your stipends are worth, this is your pet insurance, and all this stuff. Kind of that total compensation number is important, and a lot of people kind of brush that aside when in kind of the offer process, and just focus on that base salary. But I think, you know, calling attention and actually, you know, having this conversation and not being shy about saying, do you actually understand what each of these line items mean, and taking the time to explain all that goes a really long way. And, you know, definitely market rate first. You know, if you're not paying market rate, then like trying to index much higher on benefits isn't really going to help solve that, because ultimately the focus is going to be a little bit more on base salary than benefits. So kind of cover your bases there first. But then when you are trying to become even more competitive, say your market rate on both salary and benefits, you know, at that point, it might be an opportunity to see, you know, what behavior might you be trying to change, or what behavior that aligns with your company values. Say you want to really make a push to support health and wellness at your company. Maybe instead of giving everyone, you know, a slight salary increase, you might say, you know, I'm going to offer everyone, you know, $300 a quarter towards their mental health, because that's an initiative that we really care about. So I think, you know, once you're kind of at that baseline, connecting it to the behavior that you want to change or encourage at your organization, I think is a really good thing to think about.
Yeah, and you could set those expectations right out the gate by providing measurable and like either chronological like whatever the deliverable may be of the position to say, hey, from a raise perspective, this is what we need over this course of time to be completed for you to be eligible for a raise. That way, it's not necessarily a conversation that feels, I guess you would say, like a negotiation, but rather for you to retain talent and keep people that are doing a good job that you want to see succeed and that you want to stay for a while. Like providing a roadmap and giving a clear line of sight to success in the long run is, I think, the clearest way of making sure that people go, oh, cool. So if I'm able to do this by this time, like I can expect this much of an additional increase. What that looks like would be different organization to organization, position to position. But as long as you're around market rate and people are doing the things that they need to do, then it's a perfect way to set up to ensure that you're going to provide happiness and fulfillment in addition to like competitive benefits down the road. And I think that expectation set in the beginning is really, that's the move.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing to what Zach said, and Joe and Shim, you also alluded to this. This is how you also make sure that there's equity in the way that you're approaching total compensation. If you are choosing to be at market, and again, if it's at 50 percentile, that's totally fine. If people understand what they're being led into, and if you're setting up those marks to be like, hey, every year we're going to take a look at your compensation. You're making sure that there's pay equity for jobs, job titles. That's where people start to fall into this trap of, I don't feel like I'm properly compensated, because they don't understand and they have to create their own narratives. So as transparent as you can be, I know, when you're a 20-person company, it's a little hard to not be transparent, but as transparent as you can be about what the expectations are, what your compensation philosophy is, what your benefits philosophy is, and how you're investing in people. Again, that literacy part. If you are offering equity to your employees, I can almost guarantee you that they don't truly understand how that's playing into a long-term plan of them being with your company. So when you're saying good feedback or you're having that performance conversation, talk about how their contributions actually increase the value of the equity that everyone has. These are great ways to be able to tell people that you're actually making our company grow together and that you're a critical part of that success. And that's where the recognition really feels meaningful.
Thank you. We're going to open up the floor to questions, both in person and online.
So we're a global company, so we're talking about equitable benefits. I'm just curious how you make sure that it's equitable globally, knowing that, the US healthcare system has its own challenges and our European counterparts, they don't have those type of challenges. So I'm just curious how you make sure everything is aligned globally.
Go ahead, Joe.
Sure. We work with a lot of global employers, and I think the kind of one of the big questions is, if I'm offering my U.S. employees, let's say $1,000 a year, should I offer every employee in every other country the equivalent of $1,000 a year? And I think some companies have very different stances on this, and ultimately it's up to you. But what I like to say is kind of gear towards cost of living in each of these countries and kind of adjust accordingly. But don't kind of skip out on a benefit simply because it might not be, as appropriate. I say always trying to find a way to match it in that country. So if you're offering, $500 a month towards premiums in the US for individuals or something like that, maybe offer the equivalent of $500 to these other countries for health and wellness, and let them use it on a gym membership or a meditation app or, something like that as well. I think the difficult part is what a lot of companies fall into the trap of doing is US gets, amazing benefits, Canada, great benefits, UK, great benefits, and then all these kind of ancillary countries where you might have a handful of employees, here and there, don't get anything. That just feels really bad to those employees everywhere else. So whether it's kind of offering an equivalent in the form of a stipend or offering a unique benefits that local to that place, which is definitely more administrative work, I think it's important to make sure that everyone is getting offered, equivalent equivalent benefits there.
Yeah, and what I was going to share, Joe, that's a really good system that you set up too. Is that I once worked for a company where I had 2,400 employees in 24 different countries. I literally would have 2 employees here, 1 employee there, 100 employees here. So it can get very difficult and very complex. So what we did is created a benefits philosophy, a guiding principle around what do we want our employees to have. And we said we want them to be able to access physical health, mental well-being, and be financially stable. So for the countries that had, retirement as just part of how that country pays employees, right? They're already covered on that part, and just recommunicating to those employees, hey, we've actually hit all these 3 things by being compliant in your country. And where we can add more, that's where we would add more. We don't have to top you up for parental leave because you have a year. We have to top up our employees in the US because they have 0 days. So these are the easy ways to be able to have that conversation and tie it back to the values that you have at your company. I agree with Joe. If you're going to do something that's an overlay, like a health and well-being stipend, really think through how that applies cross-culturally, because also you have to remember that there may be taxation in one country and not the other. I know, for example, when we were rolling out fertility benefits globally, that in certain countries, it was illegal to provide fertility benefits for same-sex couples. So that's why I'm like, talk to your benefits brokers, talk to legal, because even though your intentions may be great, you don't want to create something that causes more risk or harm to an employee than benefit. And for those countries that unfortunately won't be able to be carved into those benefit plans, find an alternative. I have sometimes employees who are like, we don't even want that benefit, or we may not want it. So pulse your employees per country, but again, stick to that benefits overarching philosophy.
We'll do one from online. Do you have any specific advice for health plans and benefits for early stage startups trying to keep a low burn rate?
Yes. Would love to chat later. My email's in there, and I can make sure that we can maybe get a little more granular. But things to think about could be from a scaling perspective, as we've mentioned here, like an aggregate model, like a PEO. JustWorks, yes, PEO. But the idea is that you're underwritten separately outside of a small group or like a normal, if you will, like what most people are able to attain market. And you're placed into a pool with hundreds of thousands of employees that are essentially going to allow for you to get more enterprise level and comprehensive benefit packages. I think usually that's a good start. And if, those kind of dynamics and like that setup is something maybe you don't want to do, I think it's really easy to think about how much can you supply on the premium side, and then can you contribute maybe to something like a health savings account, an HSA account, super powerful tool for companies offering like high deductible health plans, which would be plans that are designated specifically to have this special account. You can put a bunch of pre-tax dollars into it. So when employees maybe do end up needing to get care, they have a special fund that's pre-tax once again, that they can go use. And pretty much like it's almost like a separate, like it indicates, savings account. Between that and then different benefit offering strategies, and it really is case by case, but bronze, silver, gold, a baseline covered as well as you possibly can, a silver covered, maybe a little bit of a better plan that's covered halfway, and then a gold that's really good. Those are all really good strategies to think about when trying to put, benefits in place, either for the first time or if you're just revamping or reboarding.
Yeah, I do not work for a PO, and I think I would echo that, right? Especially if you are a small company, really being able to use kind of the group buying dynamics of a PO are going to be really helpful to you on the HR side. And again, really thinking about, usually health and dental are the first 2 ones that you want to be able to try to, in a sustainable way, kind of contribute as much as you can to the employee premiums. Somebody actually asked this question, and it's something that we utilized early on at EverQuote, and I think it actually was quite a good resource for us. We did an opt-out bonus, right? So essentially, encouraging people, employees under the age of 26 to stay on their parental plans. We early on felt that because we had such rich benefits, people were literally on like multiple benefit plans, which actually was a disservice to them, but they did not realize that. So again, like I think we do the IRS max, which is $2,500 a year. We still make money on that. That is still like a net savings for us as a company. And certainly, you know, as the company has grown on scale, when families have moved off of our plan for that to move on to a spouse's plan, or moving children onto another parent's plan, that's been I think that's been helpful for us. But certainly not an option for everyone.
To quickly comment on the kind of perk stipends outside of insurance kind of things, what a lot of early stage startups do, like we work with a lot of, you know, under 50 employee companies, and their budget might be, you know, $100 every 3 months. Instead of saying this $100 every 3 months is only for lunches or only for, you know, gym memberships and things like that, say $100 for lunch or gym memberships or, you know, student loan repayment, kind of do whatever you want. And that just feels a lot better to the employee. By offering more options, you actually kind of enhance the use of those same number of dollars. And it just feels more appropriate for, you know, each employee to benefit from. That's what Fringe and Comp does, just for the record.
Great. Well, I know we're running short on time, so this is like a lightning round question. What would you say has been the most popular benefit companies have added this year?
Last year, 2 years ago, but I'll say work from home benefit.
Yeah, I would have to share mental health benefits, really ramping those up, making sure that the plans that we already have in place, we're servicing our employees. And again, using that equity lens, that access. If you had that one employee in, I'm just randomly choosing the state, Ohio, who didn't have, you know, as many mental health providers, figuring out how we can get that gap in coverage, whether it was through telehealth or finding a single point solution, rolling out things like Headspace, Calm, depending on where we were. And I love what Zach said, because we're JustWorks vendor client, we actually had like telehealth through them. We had Talkspace for a year through them. So again, look at what you already have. I'm a big proponent of, if you're already spending money, try to optimize it before you add something else.
Definitely health and wellness for us. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I was definitely going to say mental health benefits. We rolled out Talkspace, as mentioned. That's awesome. And I like our discounted ClassPass membership has been great. Just all things to clear people's heads, you know.
Excellent. Joe, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to mention health and wellness, same mental health.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to the end of this session. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for speaking and sharing their knowledge. And thank you everyone for attending.